The hangar bay of orbital platform Nexus 7 buzzed with activity as traders from a dozen worlds bartered, argued, and sealed deals. Among them, Marcel Reed finished securing the last crate of Terran electronics in his modest cargo ship. At 32, with a weathered face that spoke of a decade navigating the commercial spaceways, Marcel had seen his fair share of strange customs across the galaxy. But nothing had prepared him for what waited just beyond the customs checkpoint. Final verification complete, Citizen Reed. Your delivery to the Zathri Science Enclave has been authorized, chirped the port AI. Please note that access to Southern District is temporarily restricted due to ceremonial proceedings. Marcel frowned. Ceremonial proceedings meant delays, and delays meant lost credits. Still, the Zathri contract was lucrative enough to warrant patience. He tucked his authorization chip into his pocket and headed toward the transit hub. The station's promenade offered a spectacular view of the Zathri homeworld below, a swirling marble of deep azure and emerald green. Marcel had visited dozens of planets in his career, but something about Zathri Prime always struck him as particularly beautiful. Perhaps it was the three moons creating that unique silver-blue light that reflected across the vast oceans. As he navigated through the busy thoroughfare, he noticed an unusual commotion ahead. A procession of tall, slender figures with pale blue skin moved solemnly through the corridor. Their elaborate ceremonial attire, flowing garments embedded with bioluminescent patterns, indicated a formal Zathri ritual. A death walk, muttered a gruff, Centaurian trader beside Marcel. Some noble probably kicked the recycler. They'll be processing the body for the ancestral chambers. Marcel slowed his pace respectfully. Death ceremonies were sacred across cultures, and he'd learned the hard way that inadvertently disrespecting alien customs could lead to diplomatic incidents, or worse. The procession passed, revealing a clearing where a solitary figure stood apart from the others. Even from a distance, Marcel could tell she was Zathri, tall and willowy with that distinctive blue-tinted skin. But unlike the others in their ceremonial black, she wore a silvery cloak that seemed to capture and amplify the starlight from the viewport behind her. Her large, luminous eyes, characteristic of her species, were rimmed with what Marcel recognized as signs of distress, though he couldn't say exactly how he knew this. Something about her posture, the way her slender shoulders hunched slightly forward, the trembling of her elongated fingers, spoke of profound desperation. Without thinking, Marcel changed course, moving toward her. "Are you all right?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Cross-species etiquette wasn't his specialty, but basic compassion translated universally. The Zathri woman turned, her large eyes widening further as they fixed on Marcel. There was a moment of assessment. He'd seen it countless times when humans and non-humans first interacted. She was cataloging his features, presumably noting his lack of fangs, claws, or other predatory characteristics that some species found intimidating about others. "You are Earth-kind," she said in lightly accented standard. Her voice had that musical quality common to Zathri speech, like each word contained a hidden melody. "Human, yes," Marcel confirmed with a slight nod. "Marcel Reed. I couldn't help but notice you seemed troubled." The woman glanced nervously over her shoulder at the departing funeral procession. "My husband." She gestured toward the procession. That was his final passage ritual. "I'm sorry for your loss," Marcel offered automatically. A bitter laugh escaped her. "Loss? Yes. More than you know." She hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "How familiar are you with Zathri law?" "Human." Marcel shrugged. "Only what's in the standard trade regulations. I deliver shipments here a few times a year, but do you know the 3-day clause?" Her long fingers grasped his forearm with surprising strength. "I can't say that I do." Her grip tightened. "It's an ancient matrimonial law. When a Zathri of noble house is widowed, they must remarry within 3 solar days or forfeit all inheritance rights. It dates back millennia, when our houses feared bloodline disruption." Marcel's brow furrowed. "That seems archaic." It is barbaric, she hissed, but remains binding. My husband's family, the House of Rax, they've been waiting for this. They never approved of our union. They will ensure no suitable Zathri offers for me before the deadline. But surely in modern times. Modern? Another bitter laugh. The Galactic Concordat respects cultural sovereignty in domestic matters. The Zathri High Council has upheld this law 16 times in the last decade alone. Her eyes darted around. Nervously, I have precisely 72 hours before I lose everything. My research laboratory, my residence permits, perhaps even my professional standing. Marcel shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry, but I'm not sure how I can help with. The Zathri woman's eyes suddenly fixed on something over Marcel's shoulder. Her posture stiffened. They're watching already, she whispered. My husband's cousins. They've probably dispatched legal observers to document my failure to secure a new marriage. Before Marcel could respond, the woman made a swift decision. In one fluid motion, she dropped to a traditional Zathri supplication posture, one knee bent, palms upturned. The sudden movement drew stares from passers-by. Human, she said, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby. I know this is unexpected, but I beg you, marry me, and I'll warm your bed. Marcel froze, his mouth hanging open in shock. Around them, conversations halted as dozens of eyes turned their way. In the silence that followed, Marcel could swear he heard the distinct sound of a recording device activating somewhere behind him. Are you completely insane? Marcel hissed, having pulled the Zathri widow into a quiet alcove away from prying eyes and recording devices. You can't just proposition a stranger for marriage in the middle of a space station. I apologize for the dramatic approach, she said, her composure partially restored. But I assure you, my situation is dire. I am Thelia Zonvax, primary researcher at the Molecular Adaptation Institute, and, until 3 hours ago, wife to Counselor Jareth Vax. Marcel ran a hand through his hair. Look, I sympathize with your situation, but marriage? That's not something humans take lightly. Thelia's large eyes studied him carefully. I understand your species forms emotional attachments before mating bonds. This would be a temporary arrangement, a marriage of legal convenience only. That doesn't make it any less crazy. Please, hear my proposal fully before deciding. Her voice took on a professional tone that seemed at odds with her earlier desperation. If I don't remarry within 3 days, I lose everything. Not just personal possessions, my entire life's work. And what exactly is this work? Marcel asked, still skeptical, but increasingly curious. I head the Adaptive Biosynthesis Laboratory. We're developing methodologies to grow rare minerals that normally require destructive mining techniques. Her eyes lit up despite her distress. My latest breakthrough could revolutionize how the galaxy sources quantium-40, eliminating the need for asteroid fracturing. Marcel whistled softly. Q40 was among the most valuable substances in known space, the key component in advanced jump gate technology. If she wasn't exaggerating, her research was worth billions. And your husband's family wants to take over this research? Thelia's expression darkened. House Vrax has heavy investments in traditional mining operations. They would happily see my work buried, rather than revolutionize an industry they profit from. That's quite the conspiracy theory. 2 of my lab assistants were approached with bribes last month. Our facility suffered an accidental power failure that nearly destroyed years of cultures. She fixed him with a penetrating stare. This is no theory, human. This is calculated corporate sabotage. Marcel leaned against the wall, tried to process the situation. Even if everything you're saying is true, what's in it for me? Beyond the obvious complications of fake interspecies marriage. Compensation, of course. Thelia straightened to her full height, nearly a head taller than Marcel. I can offer exclusive shipping contracts for all laboratory materials. Additionally, upon successful patent of our growing techniques, I would grant you 10% of all licensing revenues. Marcel's eyes widened. Even a fraction of Q40 biosynthesis patents would set him up for life. Still, something didn't add up. Why me? There must be other Zathari who. The law requires remarriage within 3 days, but it doesn't specify to whom. Her voice lowered. My husband's family has ensured no suitable Zathari would dare offer. They've spread rumors about my mental stability, suggested my research is fraudulent. And you think marrying a human would bypass their influence? Precisely. Philia nodded. Interspecies marriages fall under galactic concordat protections. They would have additional legal hurdles to overcome. Before Marcel could respond, his personal communicator buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. What is it? Philia asked. My docking permit just got revoked. Some kind of administrative error, according to this notice. He looked up at her. Your in-laws work fast. Philia's slender fingers trembled slightly. They're isolating you. Next will come accusations of smuggling, visa irregularities, or health quarantine. Violations. Standard Vrax tactics. Marcel's jaw tightened. He'd built his modest shipping business from nothing after leaving Earth's military service. The thought of losing it to someone else's family drama made his blood boil. So you're saying they're after me now, too? You've been seen with me. That makes you a potential obstacle. Philia's voice was matter-of-fact. The House of Vrax doesn't distinguish between business and personal matters. Everything is leverage. As if on cue, Marcel's communicator buzzed again. This time, it was a formal notice from station security requesting his immediate cooperation regarding concerns about unauthorized cargo. This is moving too fast, Marcel muttered, but his instincts, honed during his Marine service years before, were already assessing options and exits. We don't have much time, Philia urged. I've prepared a legal contract stipulating the terms of our arrangement. She produced a translucent data tablet from within her cloak. Everything is documented. The temporary nature of our union, your compensation, the dissolution process after sufficient time has passed. Marcel scanned the document, impressed despite himself by its thoroughness. This looks more like a business merger than a marriage. In many ways, it is. Philia's expression softened slightly. I don't ask this lightly, Marcel read. But I am desperate, and you appear to be both kind and pragmatic. Marcel's communicator buzzed a third time, another urgent notification from station authorities. He made a quick decision. 3 conditions, he said firmly. First, I want it in writing that this marriage dissolves after exactly 1 standard galactic year. No extensions. Second, I get 15% of patent revenues, not 10. And third, he paused, considering his final term carefully. Third, you tell me the absolute truth from now on. No more surprises. Philia's large eyes studied him for a long moment before she nodded. Acceptable terms. Her slender fingers made several quick adjustments to the contract. We have a galactic administrative officer stationed on level 12. They can validate our union immediately. As they sealed the agreement with their biometric signatures, Marcel couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made either the smartest or most foolish decision of his life. To be clear, he said as they headed toward the station's administrative sector, when you said warm my bed, that was just a figure of speech, right? Philia's lips curved in what might have been a smile. Among Zathari, it's a traditional phrase. It refers to the practice of sharing body heat during the cold morning night. Right, Marcel nodded. Just checking. What he didn't say was that the small smirk that accompanied her explanation left him utterly unsure which of them was now playing whom. The Galactic Administrative Office on Level 12 was little more than a sterile cubicle with a bored-looking Navarian official whose 6 eyes barely looked up from their console as Marcel and Philia entered. Purpose of visit? The official droned, 3 of their eyes still fixed on scrolling data while the others assessed the unlikely pair. Marriage certification, Philia stated firmly, placing her identification crystal on the scanner. That got the Navarians' full attention. All 6 eyes blinked in unison as they took in the tall, elegant Zathari woman and the comparatively stocky human male beside her. Interspecies union? Do you have the proper compatibility assessments? Genetic hybridization waivers? Cultural integration certificates? Marcel felt a flash of panic. but Thelia remained composed. Article 47b of the Concordat Marriage Protocols specifically states that emergency matrimonial proceedings supersede standard documentation requirements. She produced another data crystal. I've prepared the relevant exceptions packet, including my widowed status certification from precisely 5 hours ago. The official's mouth parts worked silently for a moment before they reluctantly took the crystal. This is highly irregular, but completely legal, Thelia insisted. As the Nevarian busied themselves with the documentation, Marcel leaned closer to Thelia. Emergency matrimonial proceedings? He whispered. Is that actually a thing? It is now, she murmured back. When Marcel's eyebrows shot up, she added, the citation is genuine, though rarely invoked. The Vrax legal team won't expect this approach. Before Marcel could respond, the administrative officer cleared their throat, or whatever passed for a throat in Nevarian physiology. Your exception request is technically valid, they admitted grudgingly. However, all marriages must include a minimum ceremonial component to be considered binding under Zathri law. Specifically, the exchange of life bands and the unity draft. Thelia nodded, unsurprised. I've brought the necessary implements. From within her cloak, she produced 2 slim, silvery bands and a small crystal vial containing an iridescent blue liquid. Marcel eyed the items warily. What exactly are those? Life bands, Thelia explained, handling the bracelets with reverence. They contain microscopic biosensors that temporarily synchronize with the wearer's biochemistry. And this, she held up the vial, is the unity draft, a mild neurotransmitter stimulant that facilitates emotional resonance. Hold on. Marcel backed up a step. You're asking me to wear alien tech and drink some mind-altering substance? The effects are minimal for most species, the Nevarian official interjected, sounding bored again. Slight empathic awareness, heart rate synchronization, basic emotional feedback. Standard diplomatic corps personnel use similar technology. And the drink, primarily ceremonial, Thelia assured him. For humans, the effect would be similar to, I believe you call it a glass of wine? Marcel hesitated, then sighed. Fine, let's get this over with. The ceremony, such as it was, took less than 5 minutes. They exchanged the life bands, which adjusted themselves snugly around their wrists with an odd tingling sensation. Marcel reluctantly shared the unity draft with Thelia, finding it tasted surprisingly pleasant, like honeyed mint with a hint of something he couldn't identify. By the authority of the Galactic Concordat, the administrator intoned, I hereby certify this union as valid across all signatory worlds. Notification has been transmitted to the Zathri Central Registry. Marcel expected to feel different somehow, but as they exited the administrative office with their marriage certificate securely stored in both their personal data devices, he felt remarkably unchanged. The band on his wrist was lightweight and unobtrusive. He could almost forget it was there. That's it, he asked as they walked toward the transit hub. We're officially married now. Indeed, Thelia confirmed, though the Vrax family will certainly challenge the legitimacy once they... She stopped abruptly, her slender body going rigid. Marcel was about to ask what was wrong when he felt it too, a sharp, twisting sensation in his chest that wasn't quite pain, but definitely wasn't pleasant either. What the hell was that? He gasped. Thelia's hand went to her chest. The life bands. They've completed their neural mapping. We're now experiencing basic empathic feedback. You mean I just felt what you're feeling? A simplified echo of it, yes. She looked slightly embarrassed. I apologize. I experienced a moment of anxiety thinking about the Vrax challenge. You felt its reflection. Before Marcel could respond, his communicator buzzed yet again. This time, the message made his blood run cold. They've impounded my ship, he said grimly, citing irregularities in my cargo manifest. Thelia's eyes narrowed. Faster than I anticipated. We should proceed to my laboratory immediately. It's technically sovereign research territory under Galactic Science Consortium protection. They had barely made it 10 steps when a group of 4 Zathri in formal attire blocked their path. The leader, A tall male with elaborate facial markings indicating high status stepped forward. Thelia Zonvax, he said, his voice dripping with false concern. How distressing to find you in such a compromised state so soon after poor Jareth's passing. Magistrate Krov, Telia acknowledged stiffly. How curious that you happen to be on this station today of all days. A sad coincidence, the magistrate replied smoothly. Though perhaps fortuitous, as it appears you may be in need of mental health intervention. Attempting to circumvent sacred matrimonial laws through an obviously fraudulent arrangement with this human. Marcel felt a surge of anger, both his own and, he realized with surprise, an echo of Thelia's indignation flowing through the band on his wrist. There's nothing fraudulent about our marriage, Marcel stated firmly, stepping slightly in front of Thelia in what he recognized belatedly as a protective gesture. The magistrate's eyes narrowed as he assessed Marcel more carefully. And you are? Marcel Reed, Thelia's husband. An Earth human, one of the other Zathri remarked with undisguised disgust. Does he even understand our customs? The significance of the bonds he's mocking? Marcel was about to retort when he felt Thelia's slim hand on his arm, a calming pressure accompanied by a subtle emotional nudge through their linked bands. Our union is properly registered and certified, Thelia said evenly. If you wish to challenge it, you may file the appropriate petitions with the galactic judiciary. Oh, we intend to. The magistrate smiled coldly. In fact, we've already submitted preliminary evidence of marriage fraud to the Intergalactic Tribunal. He produced a small holographic projector that immediately displayed a floating image of Thelia, kneeling before Marcel in the promenade earlier that day. Marry me, I'll warm your bed. Her recorded voice echoed in the corridor. The recording conveniently cut off before showing Marcel's shock or their subsequent private conversation. A desperate proposition to a random stranger, the magistrate continued. Hardly the foundation for a legitimate union. The tribunal will rule on this within the week. In the meantime, he produced an official-looking document. We've been granted temporary control of Jareth's estate, including the research facilities, pending resolution. Marcel felt Thelia's surge of panic through their connection, accompanied by a dizzying wave of fear. Her life's work was slipping away before their eyes. That's preposterous, Marcel found himself saying, drawing on long-buried negotiation tactics from his military days. The Galactic Science Consortium has primary jurisdiction over all registered research facilities. You need their approval for any change in operational control. The magistrate's expression flickered briefly, surprise, perhaps, that this human was familiar with interstellar administrative law. Marcel pressed his advantage. Furthermore, as Thelia's legal spouse, I have cohabitation rights under Section 12 of the Concordat family statutes. Any attempt to remove either of us from the research premises would constitute a direct violation of galactic civil rights protections. The other Zathri exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this level of resistance from what they had assumed was a simple patsy in a fraudulent scheme. The human appears moderately well-informed, one murmured to the magistrate. Perhaps we should consult legal counsel before proceeding. Magistrate Krov's face betrayed nothing, but Marcel felt a distinct surge of hope through his connection with Thelia. This matter is far from settled, the magistrate said finally. We will convene a formal hearing before the Galactic Tribunal in 2 standard days. Until then, he paused meaningfully. I suggest you both enjoy your honeymoon. As the group of Zathri departed, Marcel released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was impressive, Thelia said quietly. What did you learn about Concordat family statutes? Marcel shrugged. I didn't. I made it up. But bureaucrats are the same across the galaxy. Throw enough official-sounding regulations at them, and they'll hesitate. For the first time since they'd met, Thelia's lips curved into a genuine smile. Through their connection, Marcel felt a warm pulse of something that might have been gratitude, or perhaps even admiration. Come, she said, the momentary lightness fading as reality reasserted itself. We have 2 days to prepare our case for the tribunal. And I fear the House of Rax is only beginning their campaign against us. As they made their way toward the station's research sector, Marcel found himself wondering just what other surprises this hasty marriage had in store, and why, despite everything, he didn't entirely regret his impulsive decision. The laboratory complex occupied an entire wing of the station's scientific quarter, a series of interconnected chambers filled with gleaming equipment and bioluminescent cultivation tanks that cast an ethereal blue glow throughout the space. Marcel had expected something impressive, but the scale and obvious sophistication of Thelia's operation surpassed his imagination. "You grow minerals here?" he asked, gazing at a pulsating matrix of crystalline structures suspended in a nutrient bath. "We cultivate the conditions in which they can grow themselves," Thelia corrected, moving through the laboratory with practiced efficiency. She paused to adjust settings on a monitoring station. "Living organisms have been creating complex mineral structures for billions of years. Coral reefs, shells, bone. We've simply accelerated and directed those processes toward industrially valuable materials." Marcel approached one of the tanks, where what appeared to be a colony of translucent, fern-like structures was slowly producing glittering nodules along its fronds. "Is that Quantium 40? Yes." Pride colored Thelia's voice. "Still in early stages, but the crystalline integrity is nearly indistinguishable from mine samples." "This is worth." Marcel trailed off, unable to even calculate the potential value. "Enough to reshape galactic economics," Thelia finished for him, which is precisely why the Vrax family is so determined to control it, or destroy it if they cannot. A young Zathri assistant appeared from an adjoining chamber, stopping short when she noticed Marcel. "Dr. Zonvax," she said cautiously. "I wasn't informed we were expecting visitors." "Liran, this is Marcel Reed," Thelia replied smoothly. "My husband." The assistant's large eyes widened further. But Counselor Jareth's memorial was just this morning." The 3-day clause left little time for conventional mourning. Thelia explained with practiced neutrality. "Marcel will be staying here with me for the foreseeable future." Marcel felt a complex swirl of emotions through their connection. Thelia's discomfort at the explanation, embarrassment at her assistant's shock, and beneath it all, a lingering grief that she kept carefully contained. "I understand," Liran said, though her expression suggested otherwise. "Shall I prepare the residential quarters for 2 occupants?" "Please," Thelia nodded. And Liran, "Discreet documentation of all laboratory activities over the next 48 hours would be prudent. I anticipate attempts to discredit our work." Once the assistant had departed, Marcel raised an eyebrow. "Residential quarters? You live here too?" "The research requires constant monitoring," Thelia explained, leading him through another doorway into what was clearly a living space. Minimalist but comfortable, with sleek furniture and large viewports looking out into space. "And yes, now you live here as well. At least until the tribunal hearing." Marcel eyed the single sleeping platform with uncertainty. "About the sleeping arrangements. The couch adapts into a second bed," Thelia assured him. "I have no expectation of physical intimacy." She hesitated, then added, "Though I should warn you that the life bands may cause some dream sharing during sleep cycles. It's typically harmless, but can be disorienting." "Dream sharing," Marcel repeated flatly. "Any other effects of these bands you neglected to mention?" Thelia had the grace to look slightly abashed. "The empathic connection strengthens over time. By tomorrow, you may detect more nuanced emotional states. After several days, fleeting thoughts sometimes transmit impressions rather than coherent ideas." Marcel slumped onto the couch. "Fantastic. So not only am I fraudulently married to an alien widow I met hours ago, facing potential legal charges from her vengeful in-laws, but now I'll be dream-sharing and thought-leaking too." Through their connection, he felt Thelia's genuine remorse. And something else. Fear, but not for herself. For him. "You're worried about me," he realized aloud. "The Vrax family has extensive resources and few ethical constraints," Thelia confirmed, sitting beside him. They've destroyed careers and lives for far less than what's at stake here. Marcel rubbed his face wearily. And yet you dragged me into this mess anyway. I was desperate, she admitted softly. But I promise you, Marcel Reed, whatever happens, I will ensure you don't suffer for your kindness today. Before he could respond, an alarm blared through the laboratory. A holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing a group of security officers and Zathri officials gathered at the entrance to the research wing. Security override in progress, announced a computerized voice. Administrative access being attempted at primary entrance. They're not wasting any time, Thelia muttered, quickly moving to a control panel. Her long fingers danced across the interface. Activating emergency protocols. Liran, secure the cultivation chambers. What's happening? Marcel asked, following her to the console. They're attempting to seize control of the facility through a falsified administrative order, Thelia explained tersely. Standard practice would require a judicial review before enforcement, but they're clearly bypassing proper channels. Marcel felt his military training kick in, assess the situation, identify exits, evaluate defensive options. Can I get in? Eventually, yes, Thelia acknowledged. But the laboratory is protected by consortium security measures. It will take them time to override. Through their strengthening connection, Marcel sensed her racing thoughts. Not panic, but rapid strategic calculation. He found himself oddly impressed by her composure. We need evidence of their illegal intrusion attempt, Marcel suggested. Something we can present to the tribunal. Thelia nodded. The security system is recording everything. But, she paused, eyes widening. They could claim they were responding to a laboratory emergency if they falsify records. Then we need witnesses, independent observers. Marcel's mind raced. You mentioned the Galactic Science Consortium. Do you have contacts there? Yes, several senior researchers who've reviewed my work. Call them. Now, get as many credible witnesses as possible viewing this situation in real time. Thelia immediately began sending urgent communications while Marcel studied the security feed. The group outside had brought what appeared to be specialized cutting equipment. 3 hours, Thelia estimated, watching the feed. Perhaps 4 before they breached the primary seals. Not enough time for help to arrive from off-station, Marcel noted grimly. No, but enough to establish an official observation record. She finished the last transmission and turned to him. 7 consortium scientists are now remotely monitoring our security feeds. The Vrax family can't erase all external evidence. The next few hours passed intense preparation. Marcel helped Thelia and her assistant secure critical research samples and back up their data to multiple secure locations. Through it all, the life band provided a constant awareness of Thelia's emotions, her determination, her fear, and underneath it all, a pervasive sadness that Marcel suspected had little to do with their current crisis and everything to do with the husband she'd barely had time to mourn. As the security barriers began to give way, Marcel found himself standing protectively near Thelia. Their connection had strengthened enough that he could sense her gathering resolve. Whatever happens next, she said quietly, I want to thank you. Most humans would have walked away. Most humans haven't served in the Marines, Marcel replied without thinking. Thelia's eyes widened. You're a Marine? You never mentioned. Former Marine, he corrected quickly. I served my term and left for commercial work years ago. But the damage was done. Through their connection, Marcel felt Thelia's sudden surge of hope mixed with something like awe. A human Marine, she repeated softly. The Vrax family may have miscalculated more severely than I realized. Before Marcel could ask what she meant, the laboratory doors slid open to reveal Magistrate Krav flanked by security officers and 2 other Zathri in formal attire. Dr. Zonvax, the magistrate announced with rehearsed formality. By order of the probate division, we are here to secure these facilities pending resolution of inheritance claims. You have no legal authority to enter this laboratory, Thelia responded, her voice steady. This is a sovereign research facility under consortium protection. Your forced entry has been recorded and transmitted to 7 senior consortium observers. For a moment, the magistrate looked genuinely startled. Then his expression hardened. A desperate ploy. No external transmission could have penetrated our security lockdown. Quantum encrypted emergency channels, Thelia countered. Standard protocol for all Class A research facilities. The Vrax family should have done their homework more thoroughly. Marcel felt a flicker of uncertainty from a magistrate, though his face remained impassive. Regardless, we have authorization to secure this facility and its contents, Krav insisted, stepping forward. You will step back, Marcel said firmly, moving slightly in front of Thelia. He didn't raise his voice, but something in his tone, a hint of the command presence drilled into every Marine, made the security officers hesitate. The human has no standing here, one of the other Zathri officials snapped. This human is my lawfully wedded husband, Thelia replied, and apparently a former Earth Marine. The effect of those words was remarkable. Marcel watched as the Zathri security officers exchanged uneasy glances. One of them actually took a half-step backward. Marcel had encountered this reaction before. The galaxy-wide reputation of human Marines often preceded them. Stories of their tenacity, their unpredictability in combat, their seemingly irrational willingness to charge into situations other species would deem suicide missions, all had contributed to a somewhat exaggerated mythology. Most of the time, Marcel found the reputation embarrassing or amusing. Right now, however, it was proving useful. Is that true? Magistrate Krav asked, studying Marcel with new wariness. You serve in the Earth Marine Corps? Marcel stood a little straighter, channeling his old drill instructor's posture. 5 years, Gamma Company, 3rd Expeditionary Force. He felt a ripple of discomfort pass through the group. The Zathri might be a sophisticated species, but their evolutionary history as prey creatures had left them with an instinctive caution toward apex predators. And in the complex hierarchy of galactic species, humans, particularly human Marines, had developed a reputation as particularly dangerous predators. This complicates matters, one of the officials murmured to the magistrate. Marcel didn't know exactly what stories the Zathri had heard about human Marines, but he was happy to let their imaginations fill in the blanks. Through the life band, he felt Thelia's mixture of relief and fascination with this unexpected development. I suggest, Marcel said into the uncertain silence, that you withdraw and pursue your claims through proper legal channels. The Galactic Tribunal will hear this case in 2 days, as previously arranged. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Magistrate Krav gave a stiff nod. We will withdraw. For now. His eyes narrowed as he looked between Marcel and Thelia. But the tribunal will not look favorably on this unusual union, nor on the apparent intimidation tactics being employed. As the group departed, Marcel released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Beside him, Thelia let out a soft laugh of disbelief. That was unexpected, she said. The Marine reputation certainly precedes you. It's mostly exaggerated, Marcel admitted. We're just soldiers with decent training. The stories make us sound like some kind of unstoppable force. Exaggerated or not, it bought us time. Thelia's slender fingers brushed against the life band on her wrist. I can feel your discomfort with using that reputation, but I'm grateful you did. Marcel was still adjusting to how the empathic connection revealed nuances he might otherwise miss. There was genuine admiration flowing from her now, mixed with curiosity. We should prepare for the tribunal, he said, changing the subject. They'll be back with better legal ammunition next time. Thelia nodded, her momentary relief fading into renewed focus. You're right, and we have much work to do before then. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Marcel helped Thelia compile evidence of the Vrax family's prior attempts to interfere with her research. He learned more about her work, the revolutionary techniques she'd developed, the potential impact on galactic mining industries, and the powerful interest that would be disrupted if her biocultivation methods proved commercially viable. Throughout their preparations, The life bands continued strengthening their connection. By the evening before the tribunal hearing, Marcel found himself occasionally picking up fragments of Thelia's thoughts. Not words exactly, but impressions and images. It was disconcerting at first, but also strangely intimate in a way he hadn't anticipated. "You should rest," Thelia told him as they finalized their legal presentation. "Tomorrow will test us both." Marcel nodded, feeling the fatigue in his bones. He'd been sleeping on a converted couch in her quarters, maintaining a respectful distance despite their supposed marital status. The dream sharing she'd warned about had indeed occurred, flashes of Thelia's memories mixing with his own during sleep. He'd glimpsed her childhood on Zathri Prime, her years of study, and occasionally moments with her late husband that left Marcel feeling like an intruder. "What was he like?" Marcel asked suddenly. "Your husband, I mean." Thelia paused, surprise flowing through their connection. "Jareth was kind, brilliant in his own way, though in politics rather than science. We were matched by family arrangement, but grew to care for each other deeply." Her large eyes fixed on something distant. "He supported my research when many thought it frivolous. His family never forgave him for that." "I'm sorry," Marcel said simply. Through their bond, he felt the genuine grief she carried. Not the overwhelming anguish of passionate love lost, but the steady ache of missing a trusted companion. "Thank you," she replied softly. "It helps that you actually mean that. I can feel it." They shared a moment of quiet understanding before preparing for sleep. As Marcel settled onto his makeshift bed, he realized something had shifted between them. The empathic connection had transformed their arrangement from a cold business transaction into something more complex, more human. Or perhaps, he thought as sleep claimed him, more Zathri. The Galactic Tribunal convened in the station's formal justice chamber, a circular room with tiered seating surrounding a central floor where petitioners presented their cases. 3 judges from different species presided from an elevated platform, their expressions carefully neutral as they reviewed the case materials. Magistrate Krav and his legal team occupied one section of the floor, while Marcel and Thelia stood opposite them. The public galleries were surprisingly full. Word of the unusual human-Zathri marriage and the valuable research at stake had spread through the station. This tribunal will now hear Petition VX 7729 regarding the validity of matrimonial union and resultant inheritance claims, announced the senior judge, a venerable Tholian whose crystalline features betrayed no bias. The House of Vrax challenges the legitimacy of the marriage between Thelia Zonvax and Marcel Reed of Earth. Magistrate Krav stepped forward, radiating confident authority. Honored judges, the facts in this case are straightforward. Within hours, mere hours, of Counselor Jareth Vax's death, his widow approached a random human traitor and propositioned him for marriage. A murmur rippled through the gallery as Krav activated a holographic display showing the now familiar recording of Thelia's desperate plea in the promenade. "Marry me, I'll warm your bed," Krav quoted with practiced distaste. These are not the words of genuine matrimonial intent, but a naked attempt to circumvent our sacred traditions through a sham marriage. Through their connection, Marcel felt Thelia's mix of humiliation and anger at having her moment of desperation publicly displayed. He instinctively moved closer to her, a gesture of support that didn't go unnoticed by the observers. Furthermore, Krav continued, "We have evidence that financial incentives were offered to this human in exchange for his participation in this fraud." He produced another recording, this one audio only, capturing fragments of Marcel and Thelia's private conversation about compensation and shipping contracts. Marcel's stomach tightened. They've been under surveillance from the very beginning. The 3-day clause exists to ensure continuity of noble houses and to honor the sacred nature of Zathri unions, Krav concluded. This mockery of a marriage insults our traditions and violates the spirit of our laws. When Krav finished, the judges turned their attention to Thelia and Marcel. "The respondents may now present their case," the Tholian judge announced. Thelia stepped forward, her posture straight and dignified despite the strain Marcel could feel through their bond. Honor judges, I do not dispute that my marriage to Marcel Reed was hastily arranged. The 3-day clause left me little choice but to act quickly. She paused, gathering her thoughts. However, I categorically reject the characterization of our union as fraudulent. The Zathri marriage code requires only 3 elements for a valid union: mutual consent, proper certification by a recognized authority, and the exchange of life bands with Unity Draft. Thelia gestured to the bands on their wrists. All 3 requirements have been met. The law does not demand romantic love as a prerequisite. Indeed, many noble Zathri marriages are arranged for political or economic reasons. Yet those arrangements still honor the sacred bond, countered one of the other judges, a denobulin with deeply lined features. They are not explicitly created to circumvent inheritance laws. With respect, Judge, Marcel interjected, the question of our motivation seems secondary to whether we've satisfied the legal requirements. Either our marriage is valid under Zathri law, or it isn't. The third judge, a Rigelian, leaned forward. Human, you entered into this marriage with full awareness that it was designed to secure Dr. Zonvax's inheritance rights? I entered into it knowing she needed help, Marcel replied carefully. And yes, understanding that inheritance was at stake. So you admit this was a transaction rather than a union of hearts? Magistrate Krav interjected triumphantly. Marcel felt a surge of irritation. What I admit is that I met someone in desperate circumstances and chose to help them. Is compassion so alien a concept to the House of Rax? A ripple of reaction passed through the gallery. Through their bond, he felt Thelia's surprise at his spirited defense. Furthermore, Marcel continued, gaining confidence. Our motivations have evolved since the marriage ceremony. He held up his wrist, displaying the life band. As I'm sure the court is aware, these bands create a genuine empathic bond. Thelia and I have shared thoughts, dreams, and emotions for 2 days now. Whatever our initial reasons, we are now genuinely connected in a way that transcends mere legal arrangement. This claim drew skeptical looks from the judges. Convenient assertion, remarked the denobulin judge. But difficult to verify. Not at all, Thelia countered. The life band's effects can be scientifically measured. We've undergone neural synchronization that can be confirmed by any competent medical scan. The judges conferred briefly before the Tholian spoke again. This tribunal will require objective evidence of this claim bond. The court's medical examiner will conduct biometric testing of both parties. Marcel felt a flash of anxiety, both his and Thelia's. Neither had anticipated this development. The testing itself was painless but thorough. The court's medical examiner, a multi-limbed Edosian with specialized scanning equipment, conducted a series of tests measuring their neural patterns, hormone levels, and physiological responses while the life bands were active. Fascinating, the examiner murmured as data scrolled across their display. Despite the interspecies differences, there are clear signs of neural entrainment. When one subject experiences emotion, corresponding patterns appear in the other with minimal delay. Is this conclusive proof of a genuine bond? The Tholian judge inquired. It confirms that the life bands are functioning as designed, the examiner replied cautiously. Whether this constitutes a genuine marital bond is perhaps more philosophical than medical. As the judges deliberated, Marcel felt Thelia's growing anxiety through their connection. Everything she had worked for hung in the balance. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand, a gesture that drew curious looks from the gallery. There's one more piece of evidence I'd like to present, Marcel announced suddenly. The judges paused their deliberation. Proceed, the Tholian instructed. The House of Rax has repeatedly claimed concern for proper Zathri traditions, yet their actions tell a different story. Marcel activated his own data tablet. With the help of the Galactic Science Consortium observers, we've compiled evidence of systematic attempts by the Vrax family to sabotage Dr. Zonvax's research over the past year. The display showed a timeline of suspicious equipment failures, staff resignations following threats or bribes, and finally, the unauthorized forced entry attempt from the previous day. Their concern isn't for tradition, Marcel continued, but for control of potentially lucrative biotech patents. This entire challenge is a thinly veiled corporate takeover attempt. Magistrate Krav surged to his feet. This is outrageous speculation. These so-called sabotage attempts were routine equipment malfunctions. As for yesterday's inspection, we had valid administrative authorization, which you falsified, Thelia interjected, producing additional documentation. The authorization codes were generated using Counselor Jeritha's credentials after his death. This revelation caused a stir among the judges. The Regalian leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Is this authenticated? The timestamps are conclusive, Thelia confirmed. They attempted to use my dead husband's access codes to seize my laboratory. For the first time, Marcel sensed genuine uncertainty from the Vrax contingent. Through their bond, he felt Thelia's surge of hope. After what seemed an eternity of deliberation, the judges returned to their positions. In the matter of Petition VX 7729, the Tholian judge announced, this tribunal finds as follows. First, regarding the validity of marriage between Thelia Zonvax and Marcel Reed. While hastily arranged, all legal requirements were satisfied. The medical evidence confirms a functioning empathic bond consistent with traditional Zathri marital connections. Marcel felt Thelia's relief wash through him like a wave. Second, regarding the House of Vrax's claim to administer the estate pending investigation. This is denied. Evidence of improper access attempts and potential research sabotage raises serious concerns about their motives and methods. Magistrate Krav's face remained impassive, but Marcel sensed the fury beneath. The marriage is therefore deemed valid, and Dr. Zonvax retains full rights to her inheritance, including research facilities and patents, the judge concluded. Furthermore, the tribunal recommends a formal investigation into the House of Vrax's attempts to manipulate estate proceedings and research outcomes. The gallery erupted in murmurs as Magistrate Krav and his associates withdrew, their postures rigid with suppressed anger. Through their bond, Marcel felt Thelia's disbelief gradually giving way to elation. We won, she whispered, her large eyes wide with wonder. We did, Marcel agreed, surprised by his own relief. Somehow, in the course of 2 days, her cause had become his as well, a realization that both confused and warmed him. As they exited the tribunal chamber, Thelia turned to him. You defended our marriage with unexpected passion. Marcel shrugged, slightly embarrassed. The empathic connection makes it difficult to remain detached. I could feel how much your work means to you, and I could feel how much fairness means to you, she replied softly. I misjudged you initially, Marcel Reed. I saw only a convenient solution to my problem, not the person you truly are. They walked in companionable silence back toward the laboratory, both aware that a new phase of their unusual relationship was beginning. The crisis had passed, but the life bands still linked them, and their marriage, though arranged under duress, was now legally validated beyond challenge. What happens now? Marcel asked as they reached the laboratory entrance. Thelia hesitated. Our agreement specified 1 standard galactic year before dissolution. However, if you wish to end this arrangement sooner, I would understand. Through their connection, Marcel sensed her uncertainty, and beneath it, a reluctance to sever their bond that surprised them both. I think, he said carefully, that we should honor the original agreement. Your research still needs protection, and my shipping business could benefit from the contracts we discussed. What he didn't say, though he suspected she could feel it through their bond, was that the thought of immediately ending their connection left him strangely hollow. A practical decision, Thelia nodded, though her emotions revealed more complex feelings. Then you'll stay here? At the laboratory? If that's acceptable. Marcel glanced around the facility that had suddenly become his temporary home. Though I'll need to arrange for my ship's release and handle some business matters. Of course. Thelia's lips curved in a small smile. We should also discuss sleeping arrangements for the longer term. The couch adaptation is hardly suitable for extended use. Marcel felt heat rise to his face, and through their bond, sensed Thelia's amusement at his reaction. "I meant that we should configure proper, separate quarters," she clarified, though there was a hint of teasing in her tone. "Unless you were hoping I would fulfill my promise to warm your bed." Marcel couldn't help but laugh. "You know, when we first met, I never imagined that phrase would become an inside joke between us." "Life takes unexpected turns," Thelia replied, her expression softening. 3 days ago, I was in mourning. Now I find myself married to a human former Marine who defended me more fiercely than anyone since Jareth. The mention of her late husband brought a pang of sadness through their connection, but it was gentler now, tempered by new possibilities. "1 year," Marcel said, extending his hand in a human gesture of agreement. "Partners in this unusual arrangement." Thelia took his hand, her slender blue fingers cool against his skin. "Partners," she agreed, as the life bands pulsed gently at their wrists, synchronizing their heartbeats. Neither acknowledged the unspoken question hanging between them. What would happen when a year was done? In the days that followed, news of the unusual human-Zathri marriage spread throughout the station and beyond. The story, embellished with each retelling, captured the public imagination. A desperate widow, a gallant human trader, now rumored to be a legendary Marine commander, and the greedy corporate family they had defeated. For Marcel and Thelia, however, life settled into an unexpected rhythm. Marcel secured the release of his ship and arranged for an associate to handle his most pressing deliveries, while Thelia returned to her research with renewed vigor. They established separate sleeping quarters within a laboratory complex, but found themselves spending most waking hours together. The life bands continued to deepen their connection. Dream sharing became routine, and they occasionally found themselves completing each other's sentences or reacting to each other's emotions before they were verbally expressed. Instead of finding this intrusive, both were surprised by how natural it began to feel. One evening, as they shared a meal in the laboratory's small dining area, Thelia received a notification that made her large eyes widen in surprise. "What is it?" Marcel asked, sensing her excitement through their bond. "The Galactic Science Consortium has fast-tracked approval for expanded testing of our mineral cultivation techniques," she explained, her voice lilting with joy. "And," she paused, reading further, "they've cited recent events as justification for placing the entire project under their direct protection." "That's excellent news," Marcel smiled, genuinely pleased for her. "The Vrax family won't be able to interfere again." "It's more than that," Thelia continued, still reading. "They're offering a full development partnership. Resources, staff, distribution infrastructure." She looked up, her eyes shining. "This is beyond anything I hoped for. It means the technology could be implemented across the galaxy within 5 years rather than 20. Marcel felt her happiness flow through him like sunshine. "You deserve this, Thelia. Your work will change worlds." "Our work," she corrected softly. "The consortium specifically notes that the patent rights are jointly held by both of us, as is customary for married researchers." Marcel blinked in surprise. "But I haven't contributed anything to the actual science." "You saved it from being buried," Thelia replied simply. "And according to Zathri tradition, marriage makes all achievements shared. I could contest this, but..." She hesitated, an undercurrent of uncertainty flowing through their bond. "I find I don't wish to." Marcel studied her face, sensing the complex emotions behind her words. In just over a week, their arrangement had evolved from a desperate business transaction into something neither of them had anticipated. A partnership built on mutual respect and deepening connection. "I don't know the first thing about biotech research," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "But I do know shipping routes and trade regulations. If you're going to distribute this technology galaxy-wide, that might actually be useful." Thelia reached across the table, her slender fingers brushing against his. "I believe it might." The touch sent a ripple of warmth through their connection, a sensation that neither the life bands nor their practical arrangement could fully explain. "So," Marcel said after a moment, "partners in research as well now." "Partners in many things, it seems," Thelia replied, her voice soft with an emotion Marcel couldn't quite name, but could definitely feel, something hopeful and tender growing between them like one of her carefully cultivated crystals. 3 months later, Marcel stood at the viewport in what had become their shared quarters, watching a transport ship dock at the laboratory's newly expanded receiving bay. The vessel carried specialized equipment for the growing research team, now 20 scientists from various species working under Thelia's direction. So much had changed in such a short time. The laboratory had tripled in size. The first commercial applications of Thelia's mineral cultivation process were being implemented on 3 worlds. The House of Rax, facing multiple investigations into business irregularities, had withdrawn all claims and retreated into uncharacteristic silence. And Marcel and Thelia had gradually, almost imperceptibly, transformed their marriage of convenience into something neither had expected. They still wore the life bands, ostensibly to maintain the appearance of a traditional Zathri union, though both knew they could have replaced them with symbolic non-functional equivalents if they wished. Neither had suggested it. "Deep thoughts?" Thelia asked, entering the room behind him. Through their connection, he felt her serene contentment, a far cry from the desperate woman who had begged him to marry her on the promenade just months ago. "Just reflecting," Marcel replied, turning toward her with a smile. "When I docked at this station 4 months ago, I was a simple trader looking for my next contract. Now I'm co-patent holder of revolutionary biotech, de facto logistics coordinator for a major consortium project, and..." He paused, feeling a surge of affection through their bond. "And," Thelia prompted, moving closer, "and married to the most brilliant scientist in the quadrant," he finished softly. Thelia's lips curved in a smile. "A substantial upgrade to your career trajectory, then." "In every possible way," Marcel agreed, reaching for her hand. Through the life bands, he sent a deliberate pulse of the emotion he'd been carefully nurturing these past months, a growing affection that had evolved far beyond their practical arrangement. Thelia's large eyes widened slightly as she received the emotional message. "Marcel," she said softly, "we never discussed how to proceed when our agreed term concludes. It's still many months away, but perhaps we should consider our options." "I've been thinking about that," he admitted. "The thing is, I'm not sure I want the bands removed anymore. The connection we have now, it's become important to me." Thelia stepped closer, her slender fingers tracing the life band on his wrist. In Zathri tradition, couples may choose to renew their bonds after the first year, making a more permanent commitment. Her voice was carefully neutral, but through their connection, Marcel felt her hope and uncertainty. "Is that what you want?" he asked gently. Instead of answering directly, Thelia guided him to sit beside her on the small couch overlooking the stars. "When I first approached you, I was desperate and grieving. I saw you as a means to an end, a kind but ultimately temporary solution to my problem." Marcel nodded, remembering that frantic first meeting. "I never expected to find another partner so soon after losing Jareth," she continued. "But these months with you, sharing thoughts, dreams, everyday moments, have shown me possibilities I hadn't considered." Through their bond, Marcel felt her sincerity, and beneath it, a growing affection that mirrored his own. "Are you asking me to stay married to you?" Marcel asked, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Not just for convenience or contracts, but because you want to?" Thelia's blue skin flushed slightly darker, the Zathri equivalent of a blush. "I believe I am, yes." Marcel's smile widened. "Well, that's convenient because I was planning to ask you the same thing." Relief and joy flowed between them through the life bands, emotions too complex for words, but perfectly clear through their connection. "So," Thelia said, her voice warm with barely suppressed happiness, "shall we consider this a proper proposal this time? Rather less desperate than my first one." Marcel laughed, remembering her panicked plea on the promenade. "Marry me. I'll warm your bed," he quoted with a grin. "You know, that wasn't the most romantic proposal I've ever received, but it's certainly been the most life-changing." "And did I keep my promise?" Thelia asked, her tone playful, but with an undercurrent of genuine curiosity. Marcel reached out, gently touching her face. "In ways neither of us could have imagined," he said softly. Through their bond, he shared the warmth and contentment he'd found in their unexpected partnership. How her presence had filled empty spaces in his life he hadn't known were there. As Zathari Prime rotated slowly beneath them, its 3 moons casting that unique silver-blue light through the viewport, Marcel Reed reflected on the strange, wonderful journey that had begun with a desperate widow's plea and led to something neither of them had been seeking, but both had somehow found. "I accept your proposal," he said simply, knowing she could feel the depth of meaning behind his words through their bond. Thelia's answering smile was radiant. "Then I suppose we should inform the Galactic Registry that our temporary arrangement has become permanent. I'm sure that will make an interesting addition to our already legendary story," Marcel chuckled. "The desperate marriage that became real." "Perhaps," Thelia suggested, her eyes bright with amusement and affection, "we should request they amend the official record. After all, my promise to warm your bed has taken on a rather different meaning now." As they laughed together, the life bands pulsed in perfect synchronization, binding 2 lives that had collided by chance and chosen to remain intertwined by choice. A human trader and an alien scientist who had found, in the vastness of the galaxy, a connection neither had expected, but both now treasured beyond measure.